Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dina Borai, and I'm the Dean of the School of Continuing Education, and welcome. Ahlan wa sahlan. This is our fourth lecture in our community series. We started in September, and we have one every month, usually on a Monday, but because we were worried about when the Mulud al-Nabi, we pushed it to be safe to Tuesday. That's why this is the only lecture on a Tuesday for this year. Then we're going to take a holiday in January. Then we start our lectures again in February, March, April, and May, inshallah. I hope to see you I'm very happy that you're here today, and I hope to see you in our next lectures. I want to introduce our guest speaker today. We have the honor and privilege to have Dr. Mona Amer with us. She's an associate professor of psychology at AUC, at the American University in Cairo. I'm going to say some pretty amazing and wonderful things about her from her bio. I had the honor to get to know her a few months ago, and she's really a wonderful human being. I think like many specialists in psychology, she obtained her PhD from America, from the University of Toledo in Ohio. And what I find really, really impressive is that she went on to do a postdoctorate in Yale University School of Medicine. And that's very special. Dr. Amer has had many achievements, not just as an academic, but also at AUC we have something called the Community Psychology Program, and Dr. Amer helped establish this program. And one of the lovely things about this community program is that it focuses on disadvantaged groups, which is her primary interest and specialization. Again, I found it very interesting that Dr. Amer is specialized in Arab American and Arab Muslim minorities. I think that is also pretty fascinating, Dr. Amer. She's a great researcher. She has written a lot of books and research articles in international journals all over the world. And the last very interesting thing is that something I share with Dr. Amer is her interest in youth, and in particular, youth working to do voluntary civic work in Egypt, I suppose, and all over the world. And I think this is something that is a challenge here, but we need to do more of. Thank you for accepting our invitation. It's our honor. And please join me in welcoming Dr. Amer. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everybody. I'm going to be standing around here because these podiums are not really made for people who are short like me. So today's presentation is about principles for becoming a successful agent of change, how to actually make change. I want to thank Dr. Dina Borai, the Dean of the school, for inviting me to come here. It's an honor to be here as part of the series, and I hope that I might have something that I can share with you that might be of use. So before we start, I wanted to just explain a little bit about what is community psychology. Because when we say the word psychology, most people have the impression of, somebody who helps other people with their problems, like depression or anxiety or family conflict. You go to a psychologist in the clinic or the hospital and they help with problems. But actually, psychology has many branches, similar to engineering. Like if I said engineering, you would say, which one are you talking about? Construction engineering, mechanical engineering, petroleum, electronics, which one? Psychology is the same. We have over 30 branches. Military psychology, political psychology, developmental, cognitive, social, environmental, engineering, all sorts of different types of psychologies. And they each have very different theories, different methods, different ways of working. Many psychologists tend to be focused on research, and other psychologists are what we call applied psychologists. They're trying to make a change. So what I'm talking to you about today comes from the branch or the field of community psychology. And community psychology is a relatively new branch of psychology. It started in the 1960s. And it focuses on trying to make transformative change that is transformative, that shifts the systems or structures or cultures in order to produce a better environment that allows for individuals and families and communities to flourish in a healthy way. So it's focused at the group level, whether you're doing an intervention or trying to make a change at the group level or working with organizations, or even larger at the policy level. Like my specialization is in policy, mental health policy. Now, the content of community psychology is not specified to any particular issue. It's a methodology. It's a way of acting to make a change. You can use that way to get people to wear their seatbelts when they're driving, or to help prevent depression, or to work on poverty. Whatever the issue is, it doesn't matter. That's very different than other areas of psychology that are focused on specific issues, right? So it's like a package of methodologies that we use in order to make change. And as I said, systemic change, transformative change. When we do this, and of course there's many fields and many disciplines that look at making change in society, we have several values that bring us together. One is the focus on prevention. Community psychologists want to prevent problems before they happen. Why should we spend money treating everybody who has depression or trying to get every person who uses drugs or addiction to stop using drugs if we can prevent it in the first place? It's much more efficient in terms of money and time and effort. We care very much about strengths. We're a strength-based approach. We're more likely to go into a community and ask people, what do you have that's a strength? What do you have that other people envy in you or admire in you? Before we go into the community and say, what is your problem? What do you wish that you have that you don't have? Which is the typical way that people here in Egypt work with communities. So we care very much about strengths. We care very much about social justice. As Dr. Dina mentioned, we care about marginalized groups, disadvantaged groups. We care about human rights. We care about ensuring that things are fair and just in society. And so that's how we operate. That's what we focus on. We also focus a lot on participatory methods. We want people to be involved in a collaborative way in trying to make the change so that we can empower people and that people can be facilitated in their processes to become empowered and that communities can also become empowered. Another value we have is sense of community, which is a whole field of research and understanding how communities have like a bonding within them and how to improve that, because we know that sense of community helps prevent problems and also helps people cope with problems. We also have a value in diversity. We care very much about respecting different cultures or backgrounds of people. And then in the way we work, we care very much about empirical evidence. We want to see the scientific research before we do anything. So people come to us and they say, well, we want to do a project to help street children or orphans or people who are poor. And they come up with an idea, and we say, well, where's your evidence for the idea? Where's the research? Where's the science? We want to see research or science numbers to help us make sure that what we're doing is going to be effective or not. And finally, of course, we're focused on the psychological perspective. This is a field of psychology, so we care very much about psychology. So, for example, if you're working in housing issues for people in the informal settlements, the slum areas or squatter areas, if you're going to be building another housing area for people who are from the poor area, people might be looking at things like the unit, the functionality, is the house available, is it safe? We're also looking at how does the new structure of the environment where they're living, how's that going to impact their social relationships, their family relationships, their employment, their sense of hope, their sense of optimism, any kind of mental health issues. So we always have that psychological component to it. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit, because often when I come as a psychologist, and I'm a clinical community psychologist, so I'm in both, people imagine that I'm going to speak from the point of the clinical psychologist, the one who helps people with their problems. And so I always like to start my presentations with an explanation of community psychology, so we know where we're coming from. So the focus on this presentation, and I'm going to try to make it as general as possible with using the least amount of terminology as possible, is how to be active contributors to society. How to make a change, even if it's small, Everybody in this room can make a change. So how can we make a change to affect society positively and address these issues, whether they're a concern in the society or whether it's something that we want to improve? And I think maybe this is a good time to talk about these issues after the bombing in the cathedral, because we've been through one tragedy after another here in Egypt, and it's really tough to see these kinds of events happening, and I think many of us feel a lot of pain and anguish about what happened, and we're also, sometimes after these kinds of events, we feel hopeless, like what can I do, you know? Can I really make a change? And so I'm hoping with this presentation that we might find ways to make a change and also make a change that's effective, that is sustainable, that lasts, that does impact people. So I'm going to talk about 5 principles of change, and these are sort of my own ideas after working in the field so many years of what are the 5 main things I want to point out to you. The first principle is that everybody can be a change agent. And you know, sometimes you live your life and you see other people and you admire them for making a change or doing something or innovating in something. But every single person can do something. And imagine if everybody in this room, you know, is doing something or will do something, what an impact that can have on our society around us. Now, we do know from research that there's certain types of people who tend to be change agents. People who have certain backgrounds, they tend to be more privileged financially, they tend to be coming from families where they were taught from a young age to care about changing society and things like that. But putting the research aside, I really believe that everybody can be somebody who can make change. Whether you, regardless of your personality, if you're very shy, you can still do something. If you're very outgoing, you can do something. Regardless of your characteristics, demographic, if you're a woman, now you know from research that women are more likely to be involved in volunteerism, community service, and making change. But whether you're a woman or a man, you can, you know, whether you're young or old, regardless of the demographics, regardless of power or privilege, some of us are coming from areas where we have more power, we have more privilege that's going to allow us to make change easier. And other people are coming from areas where they have less power and privilege, and yet you can still make a change with what you have. You don't have to have a big name, you know, you don't have to be, you know, Ahmed Zwilt, you know, to have those kinds of names in order to make a change in society. Wherever you are working, or whatever your circle of influence, you can do something. So depending on, so I'm just going to give some examples of what I'm talking about, because what I'm talking about maybe sounds too general so far. So let's talk about some examples. So if we're at school or at work, let's say you wanted to change the workplace policies of your company so that they become more environmentally friendly, so that you are contributing to environmental conservation. Let's say you are a teacher in the school and you want to teach more effectively. You want to find more innovative ways for teaching. And you're not just doing it yourself, but maybe you'll tell your colleagues about these new ways. So then you impact teaching more and more children or more and more adults, whoever you're teaching, in a more effective way. So that's something you can do yourself. Or maybe you're at a university and you see a lot of people smoking and you say, well, I want to do a smoking cessation program, or I want to prevent smoking on my campus, things like that. Of course, there are hundreds and hundreds of examples of what I'm talking about. In your neighborhood, I live in a neighborhood where one of the neighbors decided last year to beautify the Midan. There's a Midan next to where we are. And it was a really bad place. You know, it was basically a place where all the kids would hang out and smoke hashish and things like that. And so the person came and he said, I'm going to put some money and invest in it. And it became beautiful. I mean, they grew lots of trees and flowers in the Midan. They colored it with paint. And now it's a beautiful area where people want to go. So just that one thing, you know, has made everybody who walks through say, wow, this is such a nice place. And it affects you psychologically. So you can change your neighborhood, the scenery. There's broken lights in your streets. Work on trying to change things so that you can get electricity in your streets. You can do some community organizing, which is like a structured, organized efforts to make a change in your community, to get members of the community together to work on something. We saw that naturally during the uprisings when we had the Ligan Sha'biya, the informal groups that were protecting the streets. But these are things that you can still do. Why not galvanize people in your community to work? And then, of course, you can do things in your neighborhoods to bring connections between people, social connections, like events or getting to meet your neighbors, things like that. So these are things that you can change in your neighborhood. Many people, they want to develop programs or projects to address certain issues or populations, like they care about something, sexual harassment, hepatitis C or HCV, street children, poverty, anything like that. How about discrimination, prejudice, like people not understanding people from other groups and trying to address those issues? And other people focus on population. Some people say, I want to help, people who live in certain areas, or I want to focus on, women who are employees, or things like that. Also, other types of change can be at the policy level, like trying to change the laws or the policies that affect us. And this can be done through advocating. It can be through actually running for a position, a political position, maybe within your organizations or schools or universities or companies, or maybe even in the local government, things like that. Or in other types of media programs to help put pressure to change policies. And then, of course, in the absence of any sort of longer-term action that you're taking, you can always do some kind of action after an event, like the event that just happened at the church. We're talking about charity drives, blood drives, depending on what the event is, how you can support that, doing some kind of rapid response, and then trying to prevent those kinds of events from happening again, if you can prevent it. Obviously, if it's an earthquake, I'm not sure you can prevent earthquakes, but anything that you can prevent, you can work on it. So these are just some examples. I'm sure in the audience we have many people who are working on projects that are some of these or completely different projects. If you're not, think about, what would you like to do? What is something that you think is important, that you would be committed to, that you can work on? Now, this is really important, not to be just a passive citizen, just going through your life day after day without actually trying to make a change. This is important, to actually be an active agent of change. If you do that, you're going to have better psychological sense in terms of feeling optimistic. You'll have self-efficacy, feeling that you have the skills to make changes around you and have self-confidence. With the negative things that are happening around you, surrounding you, at least you'll have a small circle of influence, of something that you see that's positive, and you see something happening that looks good, and maybe when you have that kind of effect, you'll feel like, oh, I'm okay. I don't have to leave Egypt tomorrow, for example. I don't have to immigrate. Like, I can actually make a change, and that can give you a sense of, like as I said, self-efficacy. And also, when you work on projects, you gain soft skills, right? Communication, teamwork, all those kinds of things. And then at the same time, you're helping whatever the people or issues that you're trying to help. You're influencing society, you're influencing community. If you want to be somebody who is really effective at making change, what are the personal characteristics that we know from research are common among the people who tend to be community change agents? And there are 6 that have been identified in the research. One is participatory values and commitment. People who are effective at making change in whatever the project is, they tend to be more participatory. They tend to believe that we can work as teams. I want to hear what your point of view is. I want you to tell me, I want to tell you my point of view, and we can work together to make that change. So they have a value in participation. They also have a value in the change itself. Many people, they want to do projects because of religious values. They believe that God told them that you should be doing something to contribute to society. Or it could be any other values, like many of us have values in social justice or values in women's rights or whatever. So these kinds of values, if you're committed to it, this will lead to more effective change. In other words, underneath all of the actions you take, is there a true core of a belief system, a true value system that guides what you're doing? This is really important, to have those values, because that's what's going to guide you emotionally throughout the process. Number 2, critical awareness, critical consciousness. This means that you're aware of oppression and prejudice and privilege. In other words, you're aware of power. You're aware of how power in society affects the relationships between people. You're aware of your power. You're aware of the other power of people. And you're aware of the mechanisms that promote power and that keep people disempowered. So critical awareness, this is something that's another lecture or another topic on another day. This takes years to really gain this critical awareness, but really to pay attention to it. If you're working with street children, you can play games with street children and make them happy. But unless you truly understand the mechanisms in society that are oppressive, that have caused these kids to become street children in the first place, you're never going to really effectively help these street children. Number 3, a sense of collective efficacy. Collective meaning as a group, efficacy meaning that we can work together. This is the true belief that if people come together, we can make a change. So this is the belief in people power. Number 4, a sense of personal participatory efficacy. This is the belief that I personally can make a change. This is a belief that many of us have lost over years and years, where we feel hopeless. Like, what can I do? I can't do anything. No, but this is something that's important for people who are change agents. We also found that people who are these kinds of empowered individuals who really make change also have participatory behavioral change. They know how to behave in ways that are participatory. They know how to communicate, they know how to listen, they know how to hear other people's sides, they know how to negotiate, they know how to deal with crises. There's certain behaviors that you have that allow you to do that. And finally, number 6, relational connections. That you have relationships that you are building that help you effectively make that change. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. So that was the first principle. The second principle is that change begins and continues with an effective vision, with an effective mission, with an effective purpose. That you know what the aims are of what you want to do, and it's clear. And I have to tell you that this is something that has surprised me again and again and again, that we're doing consultation for non-government, or for nonprofit associations, or even government, or for other groups, and they are telling us, this is the project we're doing, we need help with it. And we say, what is the project about? What's the purpose? And they can't give you a clear answer. They have a general idea of what they want to do, but it's not clear. It's very important to start off with the clear mission, with the clear vision of what you want to do. And if it's effective vision, a vision is your view of what's going to happen in the future, right? So street children will be happy, or women will be able to, women in this area will be employed, or be able to work, or whatever. And the mission is what you're doing and how you're going to do it, right? So if I'm going to have women are going to be employed in this area, how are they going to become employed? Are they taking training in something? Are they learning skills? What is it that they're doing or you are doing to support them to become employed? So effective visions and missions, they're meaningful to people. So you're really doing something that has a meaning that people care about. You know, if you care about health, pick a health issue that is an issue that many people face, or people that you know face. You're not going to pick a health condition or a medical illness that is very rare, for example, unless this illness is affecting people in a significant way, and you're going to do something for those people. It's better to do that rather than imposing your own ideas or your own needs. A lot of people come in and they feel like, it's an issue they have, right? I went through depression, so I want to help people with depression, My son has autism, so I'm going to develop a school for autism. That's fine, but at least make sure that whatever the program that you're doing has a meaning to other people around them, not just for you. Also, it's more important to start off small and then to grow. So start off little and then build up whatever it is that you're doing. Many people come in and they say, I'm going to do, this huge project. I'm going to address all aspects. I'm going to address the street and the healthcare and the employment and all of these different issues all at one time. But, you have to start off small in order to be able to correct yourself in how you're doing and where you're going, and build up the project bit by bit so that it's more effective. Also, being creative rather than just reinventing or blindly replicating things without really thinking about it. And focusing on quality and accuracy of what you want to do. Focusing on doing a good job. Because many times people will come and I'll say, well, what's your goal or your aim? And they'll say, I want to develop the leading example or a model of such and such, a community development program or prevention program or whatever, that everybody will want to copy. Why are you focusing on your image and your reputation and your fame before focusing on what it is that you're doing? And I hear this all the time. I hear it especially from the student organizations at our university. The students come and they say, I want to develop the leading, the biggest, the brightest. You know, I want to have the big name. Everybody's going to be looking at me, at my organization, and what we've done. Believe me, if you focus on doing a good job with what you're doing, people around you will hear about it. And even if they don't, what does it matter? The important thing is that you're doing the change that affects the lives of the people that you want to change. So this is something that's very important. And also focus on things that are transformative rather than ameliorative. Transformative meaning you're changing the system, you're changing the structures. Ameliorative means that it's like putting a Band-Aid. You're doing it. So ameliorative is things like, you can give people money, for example, or give people who are poor charity, but they're still poor. And the same social structures are continued. And they still depend on people like you who have more power and privilege to keep giving them money, and you still have the same cycle of poverty and power. So how is that changing anything? So this comes back to in terms of transformative versus ameliorative, comes back to that concept of give a man a fish, he can eat for a day, teach a man to fish, he can eat for a lifetime, these kinds of things. So the concept we hear about, but we have to think about it when we're actually doing our projects, that we're doing something that really is changing the system rather than perpetuating, maintaining the systems, and then we're just being, little pieces of the same machine that has continued for years and years. So, we have research that talks about the issue. When you're talking about an issue that you're going to work on, what is your issue? There are some characteristics that make the issue effective and make it more likely that your project will work out. Number one, the issue is simple. It doesn't have to be very complex. If somebody asks you, hey, Muhammad, what is your project that you're doing? You'll be able to tell them in one sentence. Not 1 hour of explanation and they still don't know what you're doing. The issue is simple. The issue is specific. You have a specific issue that you're focusing on, that it's not something that's unclear. Oftentimes I will see people, they will come and they will tell me, I say, what's your organization working on? And they say, I'm working on, let's say, addiction, and people, I want people to stop using drugs, I want people to stop using smoking, like tobacco, and parenting. And I'll say, what? How is parenting related to this? And they have a convoluted explanation that, well, if you have good parenting, then people will not use drugs in the first place and they won't smoke, so let's work on parenting. But the program that they're doing for parenting has to do with children, and they're talking about, teaching parents how to parent their kids better. How is this related to the addiction problem that you're talking about? How it's related is it's an interest of the person. The person is interested in addiction, they're interested in parenting, they put it together and they made it one organization. That's not an effective way of making an organization. Pick what it is that you're working on. You don't have to work on everything. Pick one thing or two things or even 10 things if they work together in a way that is specific and makes sense. Also, if the issue is proximate, meaning that it has a close relationship to people, that people can feel it versus something that, is further away. If the issue is important, so it's an issue that either is important because we've heard that's important. There are some issues that we don't hear about it, but it's important. Like obesity, for example. A lot of people in Egypt who are overweight, and this is a non-communicable disease. It's a disease that it affects disease in a way that's not like an infection, but it does affect people's physical health and can impact risk for other diseases. And it's not an issue that we're paying much attention to. If the issue is threatening, meaning that it's causing a problem and we need to deal with it and we need to deal with it quick. And if it's immediate, meaning that it's something that we want to address sooner than later. And also if the issue is resolvable, that there is a potential that we can change or impact the issue. Those are all characteristics of issues that are effective. So think about that when you're trying to come up with your mission and you're trying to figure out what exactly are you going to work on. If you're working with street children, for example, what is it you're going to do? What is the issue that you want to support with them with? Education, getting them back together with their parents, dealing with the police and how they treat them. What is it that you want to work on? So you think about these kinds of issues or these kinds of characteristics and coming up with your mission. All right. Number 3, our third characteristic or our third principle of effective change. Building relationships and social capital is key. Social capital are the connections that you have and the relationships, the trust, all these kinds of things you have in the relationships that allows you to make a change, right? People who have more social capital have more wastas in society. So building relationships is key. We want to work on strengthening relationships. While you're working on the projects, make sure you're strengthening relationships. Working on bonding, meaning the people within your group. I mean, as we said before, you're probably not going to work alone. You'll be working with other people, hopefully on whatever project you're doing. That you work on bonding, building the relationships within the group through interpersonal meetings, getting together, social gatherings, anything like that. Bridging is making the relationships between you, your organization, or groups within your organization and another. Like maybe you have 2 committees in your club. You have a club and you have 2 committees. Well, making the 2 committees interact with one another and make relationships with one another stronger through communication and negotiation and discussion, etc. Also, bridging between your organization and other organizations or other groups. And this can be very important because you can't be the only person or the only group that's working on this issue. Why not find out the other organizations that are working on that issue and work together? This is something that we don't see happen often. The issue of teamwork and getting organizations to work together is not so common here in Egypt, but that's something that we really need to work on in terms of bridging between, and this is good because you can complement. Like one organization may have money, another organization may have more media presence, another organization may have more scientific knowledge. Whatever it is that you're doing, you can work together to develop a product or a project that's more effective. And then to the extreme form of that is what we call coalition building. Coalition building is essentially building a new organization or a new structure that has stakeholders from all of the other organizations, and they are working together to address a particular issue. And usually that structure has a leadership, has a process for dealing with money, all those kinds of things. So that's a formal organization. So like all different organizations working on women's issues, like for example, there was a coalition that was developed to help work on advocating for changing the laws in Egypt related to domestic violence and related to women's rights. And what happened is different organizations focused on women and different leaders in the community who care about women's issues, they all came together and they established a new structure in order to work on developing them. So strengthening relationships is very important. If you have within your group an effective group, one in which the members really will make a change, that they will be loyal, they will be contributing. Many of us are in places where, you have a club in the university or you have a team in your company, and it starts off the first week, the second week, third week, half of the people don't show up. Fourth week, you've lost more than 75% of your membership. End of the year, you and your friend and the other friend who are running are doing everything. And I see many people in the audience are smiling, so I think this is an issue that many of you have faced before. But that's an issue, why? Because the membership is not being empowered. The members of your group are not strengthening in a way that allows them to feel that they are empowered to do something. If you want to develop an organization, a group, a club, whatever, a team at the company that is empowering, these are the different characteristics. Number one, you focus on strengths. What I do whenever we have a project that we're doing in my class, I have everybody in the class fill out an asset form. A form where they write the details of what strengths do they have, what skills do they have. I have a list that I think are important, and then they write additional skills. And we often are very surprised to find, we have somebody here who is good in photography. We have somebody here who's good in writing or reading or media or whatever. And so you know that from the beginning what are the strengths, and you build on those strengths. When people feel that they're contributing to your organization or to your group with the strength or a skill that they have, then they're going to be more loyal and they're going to be more interested in working on it. We also want to make sure that we provide opportunities for roles and tasks. There should be structures, positions, activities, jobs that people will join and they will say, I know what I want to do. I will join this team, or I will join this position, or I will run for this election. So that you have those structures in the organization that are ready. We also want to promote diversity. Oftentimes, when we do work, we bring people that we know in our team or our group. Our best friend, our neighbor, our mother, our father, our sister, our brother, the people that are around us. But actually, it's very important to bring diversity, because if you have people who are the types of people that maybe you don't talk to on a regular basis, maybe they'll provide new insights, new ways of doing things. Maybe they'll be able to reach people better than you would if you had your own group. So diversity is very important. Of course, the more diverse your organization or group, the more you have to care about intercultural dialogue and also conflict resolution, of course. You also want to reward participation. We know from volunteering, how many people here work in an organization or a club that has volunteers, people who are not getting paid, but they are volunteering to support something? Okay, so maybe about half the audience. So we know from research about volunteer, there's an art to volunteering, right? To making sure that people continue with their volunteering. We know that the volunteers need to be rewarded. A lot of times people come for once or twice and they don't continue because they're not benefiting anything out of it. So you need to make sure that there's a reward. Also maintaining focus on the tasks and goals. In other words, having a clear organizational structure. So having agendas for the meeting, organizational awareness, having clear timelines, meeting towards the timeline. This is what we call strategic planning, if you're familiar with that term. Enhancing social support between the different members so that people can learn to get to know each other better. So while you're working on the tasks, also working on the social relationships. Some of us are very task-oriented, I want to get this done, I want to get this done, I want to get this done, and you're not really thinking about the relationships between the people in the organization that you're working with, and that's very important. Developing structures for leadership and mentoring, ensuring that people are having the opportunity to gain leadership skills, to learn, to be able to follow through, to keep the project going. This is something that we see is a major problem, especially in youth organizations. Great organization, fabulous ideas, they do amazing things one year, the president graduates from the university, and the club basically shuts down, right? Because there's no sort of that leadership. And also very important is develop decisions inclusively, making sure that everybody has an opportunity to contribute to the decision-making process. So it's not just one person or two people or three people making all the decisions on their own, but to really have a democratic process, having the opportunity for people to give feedback, to have voting and elections for making decisions, to have brainstorming sessions. This is really important so that people feel like they're included. When it's one person making all the decisions, then all the people around them, it's like an onion. They start peeling off bit by bit until there's only the core left because people are not going to be that interested in continuing. All right, so that takes us to the fourth, and this is a very, very important principle, is to always use data. We have to have evidence and data all the time in whatever we're doing. Now, sometimes when you do projects, there are some reasons why they don't work out. Or you might think it's working, but it's not really working as you think it is. Number one, faulty assumptions or theory. Like you have a belief behind how things work, but that's not really how it works. Faulty assessment, faulty applications, faulty information, or you didn't evaluate to see why it's not working or how it's not working. In other words, you need data, you need evidence, you need proof to show what you're doing is effective. Now, when you work on a project, if you're going to be developing a project, you have to be collecting data at all stages of the issue. So you start off with needs assessment, right? I'll give you a needs assessment from the very beginning, then developing the project or developing the research, and then program evaluation, like evaluating the program throughout the process. And I'll talk a little bit about each of these. And when we're talking about program evaluation, we're talking about monitoring in general. We're talking about evaluating the process, the outcome, the impact or the results on the long term on society, as well as the economic impact if you're doing something that you think is going to be saving money, or you want to make sure that the money you're investing in your project is effective. So let's take you through these one by one. In terms of needs assessment or resources assessment, every time I talk about this, I think of an example. I was visiting an orphanage one day, and I was doing a project in the orphanage, and a bunch of girls, young women came in, and they told the head of the orphanage, we want to visit the kids. And they said, why? And they said, well, we want to play games with the kids, we want to help the kids. And it was like one of those religious holidays or something. And I remember thinking, why are you here? Why are you going to come to play with? Do the kids want to play with you in the first place in the orphanage? How are they going to feel when you come one day and you don't come again? What are the implications of the project that you're doing? Did you ask the children if that's what they want? Maybe they want something else. What is your needs assessment? You need to be sure that what you're doing has a purpose and that it really meets the needs of the community. Is there a need for the project in the first place? Is there a need for the thing that you're trying to do? Is there something else that's more important? Maybe the children in the orphanage don't want you to come and play with them. Maybe they want something else instead that you can do. Why don't you ask them first? So the needs is very important. What are the priorities of the needs? If you have a community or an issue that there's many things you want to tackle, what is it that you need to do first, second, third? What is more important? What are the assets and resources available? When you're measuring or you're evaluating the needs, what are also the resources or assets that you have that can help address the problems of the needs? So you always want to include the both of these. I've heard some people do things like what they call the tree of problems. They go to the community and they draw a tree of all the different problems and how they're connected with one another. I think this is a problem. We can't do a tree of problems. You have to do a tree of problems and the solutions, or find other ways that you capture those kinds of assets and resources so we can build on it. Also, when you start designing the program itself, you want to do research. You want to find out what's effective. Don't just start from scratch or come up with your own ideas, you know. People come up with very nice ideas, like the idea that I'm going to get people to do a project to change their behavior by scaring them. Yeah? So don't take drugs, you'll end up dead, or you'll have a fight with your family, or you'll go to prison. Don't use drugs, it's bad. This is what's going to happen to you. This is how you look, right? Or, you know, I want you to study because if you don't study, you're going to fail and then you're never going to get a job and all of these things, bad things are going to happen, right? A lot of these ideas that you can change behaviors based on fear, we know from research that fear is not something that helps lead to change in behaviors. There are many other techniques that can be used for different issues, and different issues have different techniques that are effective in changing behavior. So find out what they are. Don't just come up with your own ideas. Do some research to find out what works and what doesn't work in the past. And if you're going to do it here, what do you need to change, or what do you need to apply to make sure that it's culturally sensitive or relevant to the group that you're working with, etc. As you're developing the project or you're implementing it, you should be evaluating the process, right? You had a project that you're doing. How was it implemented? Was it implemented the way we intended it to? Or did something happen that took it off course? And what was that something that changed it? Were all the components of the project delivered? Like, let's say you're developing a parenting program that you want to help parents learn how to help their children better. Well, did you do all of the aspects of the parenting that you said was important or not? What processes need to be improved? Did the amount of what you give, was it sufficient, right? So people will say, well, I'm doing this project to help such and such, and it's 2 sessions. Like I'm gonna give training for youth in the university on soft skills, and I'm gonna give them 1 day of training on teamwork or leadership or communication. Is that enough? Is it enough? The dosage is important. You need to know, is the dosage important or not, enough or not? To what extent did it reach the target group? How was the target group recruited? Did you actually reach the people you said? You said you were going to give some kind of, or do some projects for education for people in lower income communities. Did you really target lower income, or did you target the middle income because it's easier? What actually happened? How did people react to you? What were the factors that affected the project? So this is evaluating the process. What happened? It's evaluating the process of what happened. But also you want to evaluate what was, the outcome of what happened. Did the actual, the thing that you said that you were going to change, did it actually change or not? So did the project work? Does it meet the intended outcomes? Oftentimes we think it works. We believe it works. You say, I'm doing this project to raise confidence in youth. And they look like they're more self-confident. But does that change anything in the way they interact with other people? I say that I'm going to be doing a project to teach people in this community English or computer skills or literacy. Because if they do, then they will be more likely to be employed. Is it true? Did they really gain those English or literacy or computer skills? And if so, did they really become more empowered economically? These are question marks. You need to research that. You need to assess that in order to see. If you know that your project is effective, then the next question is, what is effective from it. You might be doing 12 weeks of training for something, and maybe you only needed 1 day of those training, and the other 11 weeks are not important, right? So this is something you need to figure out. What components are effective? What was the mechanism that actually led to the change that you saw? So that's really important. Can the project can be improved? And also, are there any unanticipated outcomes? Sometimes you do a project for something, and then something else ends up being an outcome that you never expected. How do you collect that information? How do you collect that data to see where you're going from the beginning to the end and after the end of the project to see if it's effective or not? Well, one is published research, so library research to find out what was done before, what was effective, what are the statistics on this issue, those kinds of things. Records, if you're doing something that has sales related to it, you can see if the product was sold or what happened with that. If you're doing something like a camp a camp for children or for youth, you want to see, are people joining the camp and is it changing whatever it is that they're changing? So you can look at records. Like for example, if you believe that this camp or this training will help the youth do better in their schools. So get the records of the schools to see if their grades in the schools did better or not. So you get these kinds of records. You can use observation, not just walking around and like, oh, that looks good. No, but really systematic observation, where you're collecting information by talking to people and viewing people. Surveys, you can just do a survey. I had a student was just talking to me the other day. She said, I want to do, every time I go to the club, the Nadi, I see children who have parents who are divorced. And I think they need help. I can see that these kids are upset about the divorce, and I think that we should do some kind of project, like a group or counseling or something for the kids. But I don't know how or why. Should I talk to the parents or what should I do? And I said, well, why don't you just do a survey? Just give people papers, ask, of course, the Nedi for permission, and get paper, pass out the paper and find out, is this an issue that needs to be addressed or not? Do people care? Maybe you think that they're upset and they're fine. Maybe you think they need help, but they're already getting help from somewhere else and they don't need you. Why are you going to invest the time and effort into something when you haven't really truly assessed from the beginning whether it's needed or not? So this is the needs assessment issue. So I said, well, do a survey, just do a small survey, and then maybe you can get the NEDI to establish some kind of program for kids or parents or whoever it is that needs the help. Who knows? Maybe it's something that you need to do to prevent divorce in the first place. You can't just come in with these ideas without actually measuring and testing and researching to find out what's effective. Maybe you don't need to help these kids. Maybe you don't need to help their parents. Maybe you need to help the rest of the people in the Nadi develop some kind of helpful marital program to help improve marriage so that you don't have these kinds of divorces in the first place. What are you doing and where are you going? You need to start somewhere. So you can use surveys, you can use instruments or questionnaires or measures. You can do interviews with people. Everybody who's done the project or the program, interview them to find out, was it effective? Did you learn? What did you gain? Those kinds of things. Or focus groups where you're interviewing many people, let's say 7 or 8 people at one time, to ask them about their experience and how effective it was. And there's art-based methods, using photography, art, theater, as also other ways for people to communicate what they gained from the project that you implemented. And to use that data or that information. So that's the data collection methods for the evaluation process. And finally, and briefly, sustainability is very important. What's the point of doing a project that after 1 year it's gone? It doesn't continue. Sustainability, you want it to continue. You want it to have an impact over a longer period of time. Sustainability in the concept or the mission, the purpose that you're actually continuing to work on that project. Of course, your mission or your vision can change slightly over time, but at least there's something that's continuing. Sustainability of the leadership or management. As I said, this is something that I see a lot with the youth organizations, that they have very strong leadership when it starts, and then when those people graduate or leave the organization, the rest of the organization falters because it was based on that person or those people. It wasn't based on the organization or all the other things that we talked about. So leadership and management. Sustainability of the outcomes or the impact, right? If you're going to help teach children hygiene and other kinds of skills so that you can prevent pneumonia. As you know, pneumonia is the leading killer for children in this country. Are they still doing it? 5 days, 10 days, a month, a year after you did your intervention, or not. So you want to make sure that the outcomes are also sustainable, and also the finances and the resources. You also want to find a way to sustain the financial structure of whatever it is that you're doing. I mean, if you're collecting charity every Ramadan or every Christmas to give to people who have problems, that maybe is not too much. It's not a problem. You can every Ramadan or every Christmas ask people for money and they will give it to you. But if you're doing a project that's longer term, you can do a huge donation drive when you first started, but you need to find a way to collect money to keep your project sustainable. You might be able to get grants or financial support if you don't know, but many companies, banks, things like that, they have like money, like small grants that you can apply to. There's many foundations you can apply for funding also. But also, how can you, within the structure of the organization or whatever it is that you're doing, develop some kind of sustainability for the financial, so that somehow you're making money as you are using the money. So that's really important. And the keys to sustainability for an organization or for things that you're doing to be sustainable are some of the things that we've been talking about since I started. That you're focusing on strengths. You know, a lot of times when people focus on the problems, you look at the problem, you face the problem, you identify the problem, you try to fix the problem, and you completely missed all the strengths and the assets that could have been used. When you build your solutions on the strengths and assets that you have in your community, in that location, the project is going to be much more sustainable than if you try to find external solutions to solve it. If you have more participation, that the group that you're with has more participatory, more democratic processes, people feel like they're being involved. If people are being more empowered, the people that you're working for or you're developing the projects for, or you and your organization, people are more empowering. If you have stronger relationships, as we said, you're building better relationships between you and the members in your team, as well as your team and other external members, all of those things. This can help make the issue more sustainable. Relationships should be reciprocal. They should be mutual. So if you're developing a partnership with another organization, that there is a give and take, and that is more reciprocal, because that will lead things to be more sustainable. Also, if you have a clear organizational structure, the organizational management or the organization development of your team is effective, as we talked about before, and that you're building things on evidence. You know, if you're building things on the data, the science, the evidence, then it's going to be more likely that what you do continues and that it's effective. Because if you don't, and you're building it on your ideas or your heart or your passion, that's nice, but who knows if what you're doing is going to last long enough. So that's the issue of sustainability. So finally, just to remind us again, what are the 5 principles that we covered today? Number 1, everybody can be a change agent, and I really hope that everybody in this audience takes some time out of their schedule to do something that makes a positive change. Number 2, that change begins and continues with effective vision and purpose. So once you know that you're going to make a change, that you have a clear vision that's effective for what kind of change you're going to make. Number 3, that you build the relationships that you need in order to make that change effective. Number 4, throughout the entire process, before you start to after you end, you're collecting data and evidence to help promote what you're doing in an effective way. And number 5, ensuring that what you do is sustainable. And that is it. Oops. So thank you very much. So we have a few minutes for questions or comments. We have another microphone in the audience over there.
Thank you for your presentation. It's really useful, and I enjoyed it so much. My question is, at the very beginning, you said that we are trying to predict the problems before it occurs. So I'd like to know how can you predict the problems in order to solve it before it happened or before it occurred?
Well, in community psychology in general, and I hope many of us will also work on this, it's more effective to prevent the problem before it starts, right? Because if you prevent it, then you don't have to spend so much time and effort and money to solve the problem after it happens. So it depends on what the problem is, right? So if you're talking about, health problems, like hepatitis, for example, we have the highest rate of hepatitis in the world. There are risk factors. There are ways that people can get hepatitis, right? So can we work with the hospitals and the nurses, for example, to make sure that the blood transfusions and that the syringes are clean and these kinds of things to ensure that more people do not develop hepatitis. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So you prevent it before it happens. Now, there still are people in society who have hepatitis, and we have to help them. You cannot just focus only on prevention and not helping the actual problem. But too much effort focuses on dealing with the problem, especially the big problems that get worse and worse and worse, that we can't close our eyes to it. So we focus on dealing with the problems, but we don't focus on trying to prevent them. And so the cycle of these problems continue. You still have more and more people who have hepatitis. So we have to do both at the same time.
So you mean that we need to ask hospitals to provide advice for people to avoid this kind of illness?
This is one example. There are many ways that you can get hepatitis. So depending on where you're working or what you're doing, this virus C, hepatitis virus C, you have to, depending on what it is, you do a project. Somebody's working in the hospital, somebody's working in the barber shops, everybody, it depends on what you're doing, but you can do many things to help.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Help work on prevent. Okay. You can work in the media, to let people know things. You can work on screening tools. You can work in chemistry to develop, projects to diagnose the hepatitis or the HCV. So there's many things you can do. Everybody has a role they can play. Yes, question?
Yes, please, could you tell me an example to explain the difference between mission and vision?
Okay.
Thank you.
Vision is sort of like what will be the case or the situation after the project is implemented, and it's usually written in the present tense, like a world with, or a community without hunger, right? So people are not hungry, right? So you're working in an area where people are very poor, and you say, or women who are empowered, or youth who are successful. So it's something that's written in the present tense. That's your vision. After whatever it is that you do, they will not be hungry, right? They will be successful. So that's what a vision. Of course, not everybody applies the word mission and vision. If you go to any website of NGOs, you will find the mission and the vision written in ways that don't actually match the definition of what is a vision and mission. But anyways, a mission is really what you're doing and how you're going to do it. So both things are together, right? So offering, employment services to help generate income that will lead to less hunger, right? So that's how we're going to get to that place where there's less hunger, through doing these kinds of services, right? So it mixes the two. There's a very nice website, if anybody wants to look at it, it's called the Community Toolbox. The Community Toolbox, it's the largest website of resources for making change in community, and they have an entire version in Arabic. Everything was translated by the American University, the AUB of Beirut. But this is a great website if you want to look. It has everything you need about how to establish an organization, develop connections, enter the community, develop evaluation, anything that has to do with community work. And they also have consultation online if you want to email. Our website, also the psychology unit at AUC, if you look at the psychology department or psychology unit, we have something called the NGO Toolbox. It's a website that has resources, documents, links that can also help you if you're doing any work. Both of those resources have things related to mission, vision, strategic planning, things like that. So. All right, other questions? Or comments or examples you want to share?
Thank you very much, and join me in thanking Dr. Amer. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.